We're all fellow Jitsters.
Okay, recording started. It says Evolix.
Great.
So welcome to the official of the link call of January. Today is the
24.
24th, 2024. So 24. And yes, we are in a new platform, so I hope it works. This is the first recording on this platform. Yeah. So how is
Good.
everybody tonight?
Good. Happy. Pete and I just got off a productive call talking about the future of Massive Wiki and other sorts of things.
Yes.
So that was fun.
So I would love to hear more about that. Maybe it's part of the agenda today.
I think it might be early.
Okay.
Um,
No.
I don't know your call, Jerry, but
I'll go with your call. Yeah. If you'd rather postpone that, that's good until we've shaped it more.
I just don't know that I would do a good summary of it. We talked. We took an hour call and turned it into a 2-hour call and ranged all over the place. So summarizing
Nice.
that next week would be better than this week.
Yeah, I mean, sounds great. So on a
Cool.
productive call.
And I can tell you that next week, Wednesday, I think so. An hour and a half after Fellowship of the Link, next Wednesday is Massive Wiki Wednesday, and Jordan and Jerry and I are going to bring the future of Massive Wiki discussion that we had to that venue. So I'm sorry that's late for you.
So 1 hour
Constance.
and a half. Yeah, I mean, it can be a special late Wednesday. Maybe. The future of massive week. Yeah.
We'll continue having the discussion, and we don't always have to have it at Massive Wiki Wednesday, but
Yeah.
so if you miss that one, it's okay. We'll keep the conversation circulating.
Cool. I would love to see a graph of all the meetings you are in, and I'm in, and so on. And then, I mean, does this exist? If not, it's in scope.
Yep.
Yeah. And
I started building something like that for Plex. It mapped all the OGM calls and some other calls. It was and I built it in Google Sheets actually. And it had this cool thing where you could kind of it made it easy to see you could I had like several time zones, 5 or 6 time zones in a column on the left, and so you just went down to your time zone, and then you could see all the meetings nearby. Google Sheets ended up being too clunky to maintain that, so um, anyway, if
okay.
somebody's building that like in HTML or something like that, let me know, and I would love to show you the 5-minute demo of that old Google Sheet.
So here, that I would love to see a sheet first. It's like I love sheets, even for all the downsides. It has upsides, but the other is like this reminds me of like I think last time we said let's continue where we left off, and here I see a bridge, NeoBooks, because I thought of this HTML approach and so on made me think that you mentioned made me think of Adam's work recently, the like playlists and meetings being a playlist of events. It will be the pitch, and here we go into a neo book saying like, well, if we all have our agendas, which are like books, well, maybe the neo book that we can explore in this space is like the shared agenda of all our meetings. So here we go back to neo books, if you want. And I think we had said we wanted to resume from neo book, transclusion, and some other key term. There was a third.
Hang on, I'm in 2 calls at once. Michael, oh, Michael, we've moved to a different venue. We're over in, if you, can you get to Mattermost, or do you want me to copy and paste the link? Let me try to copy and paste the link real quick too.
I think we need to make sure that everybody's in the calendar invite as well, because that's
And
a
Pete, you are very kind to stay in that other
thank you.
chat.
Yes, the calendar invite is what I always go by, but I did check the Mattermost this time.
So Michael should be joining us presently.
So, thank you so
All right,
much,
good.
Peter.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pete.
Yeah.
Welcome, Michael. Sorry for the friction in onboarding to always different platforms.
Well, it's a little bit like a scavenger hunt. Like to get into Fellowship of the Link, you have to actually go on a quest to figure
Yes.
out where the hell did Flancian move us today.
Yes. Or look at the calendar entry. And here, if you're not in the calendar entry, just paste your email and I will add you right away.
Yep. And if
It's
your name
actually
is
it's Fellowship of the Traveling Link.
oh, I like that.
I mean,
That's really good.
this keeps us agile, right? Because, like a group that always meets in the same place, sure, it's easy. But a group that can be like, okay, in 5 minutes in such a place, and then we teleport, which is what the internet allows.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of cool, actually.
I like it. And if your name is Chris Aldrich, you also have to spend 10 minutes fussing with your camera and audio.
And me too. Come on. It's like,
Yeah, that's true.
we
That's
can
true.
record. Yeah.
So any other business before we pick up on the NeoBook stuff from last time?
So I
Any
guess
other?
just
Go ahead.
quickly on my, I guess, I don't know if it will come across. I'm actually in a good mood right now, and I think that's usually the case. But I'm dealing with a lot of stuff at work that keeps going on, like the layoffs at Google. Yeah, that sent me to a lot of reflection, also in the context of a NeoBook,
Oh, really?
right? Which is open letters.
Yeah.
So I'm writing an open letter, or more than one actually, that I think may be relevant here. But
Awesome.
yeah, maybe to cover later after I think we left it off in Design from Trust as the first one.
Yep. Can you say just a little bit more about open letters and NeoBooks and how you got inspired?
Yes. So I've been like playing with this notion of the open letter and like looking around, trying to like research, as in like reading online. I guess it's amateur research on the genre as it evolves through history. And there's a lot of very interesting examples, and they tend to be very positive. I mean, the ones I found quite inspiring, like Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, the Dreyfus affair, with Emile Zola, like this denunciation for the public good, and in defense of ethics and so on, as a tool for any citizen. And like I think as a genre, it's just amazing for the internet. It's amazing for intertext. It's amazing for collaboration. So and all the formats, like individually open letters to the same people, maybe. This is a NeoBook, right? If we all write a short open letter or a tweet, which can be like seen as open Telegram, say, and we address this to Elon Musk, to take one example, not at random.
So
Yeah.
So how is an open letter different from a web post that goes viral?
I mean, it is. Of course, it can be not different at all, depending on context and how it's used and perceived. But also, like the open letter has some intention. Apparently, this is the pattern of, has occasionally a particular destinatary, so recipient, but it is written with the intention to be read public. But it keeps this notion of interlocutor. I think it plays with the notion of who is, often plays with the notion of who is reading. Yes, so maybe it has some sort of like some meta awareness in this sense. But yes,
Right.
I mean, it can be perceived as like yes, it's I guess in the end, it's a series of posts we can write with an intention.
So I'm thinking of this definition of an open letter as a particular topology of communication, in the sense of phone calls are one-to-one,
Yeah.
blogging is one-to-many, and in
Yes.
this case, it's one-to-one with an obvious intention to have the many influence the one. Like in
Yes.
fact, usually open letters, I think, are one-to-one or one to a group that you can't convince,
Right.
and you want the social pressure to fold back on them, right?
Right.
Okay. So now, how can NeoBooks make that more powerful?
I think so. So I think of NeoBooks as, in my mind, they are like sort of like the same shape as an Agora node. Just like in terminology, I mean, they have a lot of like common things in common, in the sense that a NeoBook can maybe reduce the friction towards collaborative projects.
Yep.
And in the case of a NeoBook, I think it will just be interesting to me, because as I was reading through these open letters and analysis of these open letters, they all were highly interesting to me. I think they tend to be like just hugely interesting. Personally, of course, this goes to the topic, to anybody interested in a certain topic, but they are like a constant through history, and I think they get amplified with new media. So neobooks as sort of like as new media, I guess it is interestingly interesting to me how they could shape this genre. And of course, the internet seems ideal for this. And to some extent, it has sort of evolved things that are like similar to this. So maybe it's terminology only.
I think
Go ahead, Aaron.
I'm just going to add, I think probably one characteristic of open letters that is unique that could be applied to neobooks as well is portability, right? In the sense that the content is intended to be separated from any particular host and passed around in a way that like blog posts are not necessarily intended to, and that maybe books are less intended to than neobooks are.
Completely, yes. Yes, I believe that in general, like, I think, well, I'm interested in exploring, particularly maybe the space between the individual post and the wiki. So a lot, and the interconnectivity between things as well. So this is where like maybe 100 small open letters is something that just hasn't emerged before, and the connectivity between the two, what they have in common, etc.
So a couple things occurred to me. One of which was neobooks done in a neobooks way are very, very wiki in the sense of there wouldn't just be plain text, but there would be linky text, which means they would connect to whatever backup evidence or arguments or other kinds of things would be out there. And then part of the conversation Pete and I just came out of was about how voice or opinion gets syndicated across groups. And we were sort of making the analogy with voting and proxy voting in the sense of, hey, Flancian, I would like to give you my proxy for whatever decision-making system you might be part of on issues of note-taking and regulation of IT, for example, right? Now, if I could do that by connecting to your open letter, if by including your open letter in my statement of desires or whatever, or my wishful policy making list, that would be really pretty cool. And all of a sudden, the open letter becomes more of a platform for gathering up, it's not just that this open letter has 300,000 signatories, but rather that the author of this open letter can say, these 300,000 people will do X, next Tuesday, etc.
Yeah, exactly. The open letter is sort of like, in this scenario you're describing, is like the quantum of cooperation, maybe in a platform, no?
Yep.
In the sense that, as long as you can write a declaration of intents, and then try to follow through with them. And in this sense, how these different open letters relate is the same shape as how our intentions relate. And, it has all the power of that if we make it work, if we make it a compelling read, if we maybe have different entry points. You could imagine an open letter with the same destinatory, many open letters with also different secondary audiences, like more or less technical or more or less interested in different disciplines.
Does the relative rarity of open letters make them more important and more noticeable?
Sorry.
That's okay. Was that 2 cats and a dog? I missed what that was.
No, it was 1 cat, a little group.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So this is a little bit like manifestos, and I just put a link to Manifesti in my brain. There are so many people have written manifestos that they've lost some of their potency. So if one were to draw too much attention to open letters, do they suddenly get devalued because everybody decides, oh, I'm going to stop blogging, I'm going to start open lettering?
Yes, that's true. And to some extent, this sends me back to the blogging, yes, you mentioned, where like initially there was a lot of debate. I remember, I guess I was around for that one, where like people were like, oh, this values the word to some extent. Which is, of course, interestingly the same, same shape as many arguments before, like for the printing press. So to some extent, yeah, like every maybe socially every intent that has a written platform maybe evolves with the the availability of the platform. Yes, this goes back I think to Aaron's point on the which hosts which in the olden times were like publishing houses, which are the hosts that you need to rely on to actually get this voice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm monopolizing Bunsen here. Anybody else with thoughts about the open letters aspect?
I think there's an interesting characteristic of open letters that's sort of outside of neobooks, or maybe it isn't. Like in modern times, open letters are often implied to have many authors, or created with a degree of anonymity. So the many authors thing mirrors neobooks, but the idea of being able to present something with a degree of anonymity is a little bit harder, I think, in modern times than it has been, certainly now than it has ever been, right? Like sort of the platforms where you can post something anonymously are disappearing. So that's an interesting piece of it.
Definitely, that actually has to do with how and why we jump so often video platform. It's unclear which abuse hit these video platforms recently, but apparently it was big enough to actually warrant closing anonymous access.
The Wikipedia page for open letters doesn't include really any mention of anonymity, although I see what you're saying. But it seems like a lot of open letters are very much, I'm saying this to you over there, and you have pretty good declaration of who's saying what to whom.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly a lot of them are multiply authored, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which itself,
yeah.
Yeah, the ones that have a lot of signatories. I mean, I guess now, so climate change, I think has so a few, and AI, of course. Yeah, I think they get published when some people have already read them. So within the circle of trust. I guess here is like, I guess I'm more drawn to the idea of developing them fully in the open, like neobooks. I don't know how you see that relate with neobooks. I mean, I guess I see them, the ones I saw so far, the work I've seen in them by you and Pete, seems to be like open first, no?
Yeah, totally. And I think this is a good use of neobooks in the sense also that neobooks are meant to be very composable and composed of nuggets. And an open letter might consist of 3 or 4 nuggets rolled up into an open letter. And any of those nuggets could then become the base from which somebody could riff.
Yeah.
You could even have somebody respond or object to an open letter reusing some of the nuggets and saying, yes, that's true, but this is my different take on it, for example. That would be really fun.
Yeah, one of the most interesting sort of implications there is that the idea of like the circle of trust is sort of a feature that's really rare. So one of the few things that Medium does well is that it's very easy to be like, hey, if I have a Medium, I'm going to save it as a draft and then I'm going to share it to a small number of people to give me feedback and then hit publish. And like that's most of the times that's the tools that allow that are much less perfect at it, right? Hard to do on WordPress because you need to essentially create an account for someone.
Yeah.
Google Docs, you're most commonly just sort of making it public onto the web, which is often not desirable when dealing with sensitive subjects. And other platforms, it's usually you're either open to the web but haven't publicized it, or just one person. And so that's sort of a feature that's difficult to figure out.
Right. This sort of like haphazard like publication of the viral, I guess, going back to the blog post that goes viral, often before maybe the writer actually foresaw it, and with the unintended consequences. But I guess in this context of the neobooks, I would love for let's say underdeveloped chapters to be shared. because like that's a great in such a platform, the way I see it, that's a great moment for people to say like, I want to chime in actually, because I see this in development, so I will just add my nugget. Sort of like when you post relatively early in a big thread, and somehow like the discussion follows the one thread you propose, one subthread, so the sort of like the early influencers of a given subspace, in a graph, yeah.
Love that. That's an aside, but part of inspiration for NeoBooks and for some of the language I'm using. Nuggets are meant to be like gold nuggets, like shiny and valuable. And that's kind of the intention of writing or creating, whether they're visual or prose or whatever else, these nuggets that then roll up and compose into something larger. But it's a little bit like Indra's web or Indra's net, which is an ancient sort of Hindu notion of a large net that has jewels at each intersection of webbing, and the jewels basically reflect all of the rest of the net.
Yes.
And I don't know enough. I can't understand Indra's net in any depth, but it's a lovely image. And then Indra's net is one of multiple, along with the noosphere and the Encyclopedia Galactica and a bunch of other things, of ancient attempts to describe this sphere of connected knowledge.
The sphere of connected knowledge, right? This is sort of like looking into infinity when you are looking into the combinations set. Indra's net is fascinating. Actually, there's several. I know Indra's net in Hinduism and Buddhism actually, and there's a lot of like Buddhist cosmology, sort of like imaginaria, that is very much influenced by this because of the key notion of interdependent origination, dependent origination in Buddhism. So it has a lot to do with connectivity and all the ways in which everything influences everything. So I love that jump. And in real life, I think Indra's net arises every time you have like several objects which reflect light just nearby. You can see when you have like mirrors together and so on.
It's a little bit also the glass speed game, Magister Ludi.
Yes.
Sort of like that as well, the sages who are playing with knowledge.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Hesse, I read it over the holidays.
Oh, wow.
It was beautiful, yeah. How Hesse plays, he sort of describes what the game is like, but not really.
Right.
So to some extent, like after the initial description, then he says like it evolved from that. That's the origins. He always just relates the concepts generally, and I found that fascinating because he makes you imagine this intellectual activity, which you sort of get a feel for in the context of the world, but he never describes it.
It's a little bit like Gibson's Neuromancer, where everybody's like, oh my God, cyberpunk, cyberspace, all this. And if you go to like Neuromancer, from my little memory of it, doesn't really have a description of what he's doing.
Right. Some things are better left to the reader, right?
There's also an potentially apocryphal story of a researcher who is interviewing a little girl, and he says, what do you like better, radio or TV? In the early days of TV, they're doing this research.
Right.
And her answer is radio. The pictures are better.
Right. For some people, it depends on whether you have like a fantasia, no? But right, very nice connection. I hadn't thought about that. And I like the notion of nuggets. So in the Agora for nodes, I thought of like also like transclusion, going back to transclusion as well as if nuggets are one, in nuggets are the objects, maybe transclusion is the operation. No, I guess you could imagine two operations in like this NeoBook system. It will be linking, right? Because we are already linking from like one nugget to the other, and the other will be transclusion, right? As we have discussed, because we have said that we want the chapters to include the nuggets in whole, essentially. And maybe so the question I have now is like, will those two be enough? Do you see any other relationship between nuggets that wouldn't be covered by linking or transcluding?
Sorry, say that again.
So if you
something outside of linking or transcluding, I think my knowledge of transclusion is pretty primitive. And I think of transclusion as a special case of linking. And so I think your question is, besides linking, what else do nuggets need? And I think nuggets also need metadata of different sorts, which enriches them a lot and isn't the same as linking.
But metadata refers to the object itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be seen as part of the thing. But yes, thank you.
Exactly. So metadata may be a given, maybe just a,
Yeah.
an assumption for what a nugget would have. And I can't think of any other thing. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got something, and it's still a feeling. I'm not sure. Like I'm not sure about it yet. But let me go through it. I think another, and part of the reason I'm not sure about it is because you can do this by composition with transclusion and/or linking. But I think I would like a first-class operation of aggregation. So
Yes.
the non-first class way to do it is, well, Pete, if you want to aggregate a bunch of things, create a new page and then transclude a bunch of other pages into it.
Yes.
But that's not quite what I want. That's like that's like the weak sauce version of what I can kind of imagine in my head, where what I imagine in my head is something where I'm not working with links, and I don't know exactly how I represent the things that I want to aggregate, but then that aggregation becomes like a separate kind of object, and maybe it's more aware of the metadata of each of the objects or something like that, and changes the way it displays things based on what I want to tell it to be, and also what the content of the transcluded items are. So it's kind of like a combination of transclusion into a simple wiki page with the ability to have richer metadata from each object, and then a template overlay, a template where I can manage the way it's transcluded and the way it's presented.
Okay, so that sounds like two things that arose. It sounds like the last thing maybe a type. Maybe we want a type nuggets. But earlier, the other thing, when you want to essentially see like you wanted like a more flexible way or rich way of organizing groups of nuggets. So to say these relate like this in this context, for example, like some composition operation that is not strictly transclusion. So maybe composition most generally, no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And and I can imagine different views, right? And instead of saying, oh, look, I've aggregated, composed everything onto a wiki page, it's like, well, actually, for this composition, I want to be able to present it as a graph, and a force-directed graph, and I also want a card view of it,
Yes.
something like that.
Perfect. Yeah, I think and it's very general. I think that's sounds like the wish fulfilling genie, like great.
Yeah.
So I will say I thought so put it in Agora terms just shortly for communication purposes. So transclusion in general I call pool in the Agora, just to try to have some physical notion. Just bring it over here.
Mm-hmm.
And this other thing you propose made me think of pushes. Because when you push to a destination, you can push a block, and that block can describe the context. So, for example, here, when I said R neobooks : and this is a push. So nuggets, metadata, order, and linked, transcluded will be already tied because they are in the same push. So it could be seen like something in this direction, or the closest I know of.
I think I kind of get that. As we talk about transclusion, I also, there's another thing that I like to rely on when I'm doing transclusion, which I call extraclusion. Take this part of the page and push it out to a page that now is transcluded. Obsidian does that pretty well. It doesn't do it perfectly. I guess another thing you kind of have to watch with transclusion is we hit this last week. Am I showing the link text or not? Am I showing the title of the transcoded page or not? And I think you want to be able to do both and
Yes.
decide, kind of on the fly somehow.
Yeah. So that would be aggregation. It's sort of like aggregation, but actually it's more like distillation or summarization. Like some operation that says lets you abstract away some details.
It's like, yeah, it's like rich contextual snippets, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what you get when you paste a link into social networks, or the sort of thing that I've been working on with like Context Center, right? Where you have a link and you have a bunch of data that comes with it beyond just the potential to transclude it,
Right.
like metadata, title data, published data, keywords, etc.
Right, like parameters, those seem like parameters for the transclusion, right? Maybe general, like when, like, and this in the case of these snippets, I guess it's nice how they enrich according to where they're contained, no? And I guess the way I think about it on the internet is like, you always have the iframe. You can always have an iframe or whatever. Nowadays, most will actually fail, but conceptually, you can say, here, open this URL. And then you can say, well, open it in such a way, right? Like, for example, like show me the snippet on. And I remember OMB and all this stuff.
I have another wish thing, which kind of came up, I think, on the call Jerry and I had with Jordan, but it's come up in other calls. Anyway, I want to conceptually transclude a bunch of pages or aggregate them, and then I want that to be the knowledge source for a chatbot.
Yes, now that to be the corpus for a chatbot. Yes.
Sort of in general, it would be nice to throw a lasso around a series of nuggets and turn them into something. And just a little bit back to NeoBooks, one of the analogies I'm using a lot is mycelium, and I have the domain thebigfungus.org, but I like the mycelial analogy a lot, in part because a NeoBook is a mushroom that grows out of the mycelial substrate, so the fruiting body of the mycelium. Now, a presentation deck could be another mushroom or fruiting body out of this mycelial deck. An open letter could be a fruiting body out of this, right? And then the mushroom is connected back to the various nuggets that it's based on, built from, and each of those nuggets, and this is something that's, I think, easy to conceptualize, probably really hard to implement. Like, let's pretend that this nugget it has been rewritten by GPT at the 2nd grade level, and for a doctoral dissertation level, and there's like multiple levels, certainly multiple language translations, but also different formats. So this same idea, this nugget, as a deck, as a bullet points with very few words in them, and now as fully fleshed out prose explaining what the heck this means, they should be connected somehow together, right? They should be easily accessible so that the ideas can be brought together. So then when you throw a lasso around a few things, you should be able to do lots of different operations on that collection you've lassoed, one of which is what Pete just described, which is, hey, turn this into a corpus. And I want this specific subset to be a corpus right now. Another one of which is, okay, I'm going to add front matter, end matter, make it a book.
Completely. Yeah, and I think I like identifying this like generality because, I think whichever platforms we use seem to need this abstract like path of like take a set and produce an output. And I think we have discussed, like maybe the minimum, the MVP there is just, concatenate everything with transclusion and produce a PDF or a doc or a Google Doc.
Yep.
Right? And from there, you can go to the next phase, maybe at least to begin with. And then, we can just latch on to that, surface. It's interesting also, like going back shortly what you said, Peter, on the corpus. So first, like the whole, I will say that the aggregate of all the NeoBooks, all the nuggets, even before selection, is already an interesting corpus. So yeah, by default for any group working on those. So we start with that, and then you can refine on these. This is great. And the other is like it would be great to just what I'm experimenting with in the Agora is that right now the AI assistant just tells you something they think about the term, say open letters. But but you can definitely take all the text that is in the Agora and say this is the context. You pass it with a prompt, sort of like the user set prompts in ChatGPT. So then even you can use the corpus in that way, even without fine tuning. I guess it's obvious, but just including it in the prompt seems to achieve most, right, of like of the value, and it will be easy to implement now. And really, the UI seems like checkboxes for like which resources you want to set as context, and then like send a chat message without prompt. Maybe expensive, but it doesn't seem too hard to implement as an MVP. So
I'm just looking through my collection of open letters in the brain. It's astonishing.
really,
An open letter to His Serene Majesty Leopold II, King of the Belgians and Sovereign of the Independent State of Congo from 1890, written by George Washington Williams.
can you share open letters in your brain?
What do you mean? I just put the link
note.
to I put the link to open letters in my brain earlier in the chat.
Oh, I didn't see that.
See, if you scroll up, you'll see a brain link
Yeah.
after open
Oh,
letters.
yeah. Thank you.
Yep. I put several. So manifestos, and then visions that have inspired builders of global brains, which then links to not just Noosphere, but Memex and like a lot of the, Indra's Net, all those kinds of things, all collected up in one collection. And it's funny what you're asking me to do and what we're seeing now. The thing when I say I'd like to throw a lasso around things and make them do something,
Yeah.
that is one of the features that the brain lets me do. I can create a thought and connect it to anything I want in my brain, and that collection is now operable as something. Now the brain doesn't let me do a lot with it, but yet, exactly, especially since it's not connected properly to the Agora.
But this is going to happen this year, I believe.
But it's easy to envision that, okay, here's what you could do. And so, for instance, I have a thought in my brain, which is the table of contents to design from trust, but actually the table of contents looks better over in Obsidian, where I'm actually trying to write it, right? But those two things should mirror one another.
Interesting. Yes, definitely. And I think that's I guess that goes back also to the importance of interoperability here. Like, it would be for you as a new writer to be able to select nodes in the brain to start to import them as nuggets, essentially.
I think we need to have a theme song to the tune of Paperback Writer.
Paperback Writer. When I first heard that song, I didn't know what a paperback was.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because I just hadn't, the term in English. I figured it out because of that. I was like,
yeah.
Wow. Triple Revolution.
Love this.
Interesting. So control click. How do I open this?
The language thing my wife bumped into yesterday in Spanish and French is that clockwise isn't a word; it's a phrase.
Yes.
In Spanish or French?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in both Spanish and French. English has one word, clockwise.
Yeah. Well, is it really? You can write it as such, but it's clockwise.
It's like in German. In German, there's probably a whole sentence that's one word.
Right. Yeah, but como las agujas del reloj.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super long. It's a periphrasis. It's interesting that we haven't optimized that.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Relojoso, podría ser.
Mani derecha? No.
Mani derecha? No. Yeah.
I'm making that up, but right-handedness is in there somewhere, or siempre mano derecha.
Sí.
But that's not how you would say it clockwise.
It could be relojuno and anti-relojuno.
I've never heard relojuno.
Something cat-like is gatuno.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Other thoughts where we are right now? Otherwise, like where should I go with the NeoBooks thing if we're going to stay on that topic?
So shall we all write one nugget for next week or something? I don't know. Like I sometimes need like this kind of like
A practical thing.
Yeah,
I like that. But nugget on what? Like what?
maybe anything. I like freedom.
Just a nugget on anything? A nugget on something relating to Fellowship of the Link, let's say.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, thanks to Indra's net,
Yeah.
pretty much everything. So I love it.
Well, it could be a nugget. For example, one thing that is memorable to you from any conversation you've ever had in these calls. Just one thing that stuck with you, and just write that up in one paragraph. That could be a nugget, and we could sort of compile those and roll them up into a mini edited essay.
I love it.
That would be pretty simple to do.
A nugget a week. It could be in order.
It could be like a nutritional program.
Exactly. Yes. Like keeps the doctor.
Yeah, a nugget a week keeps the doctor away.
Yeah.
A nugget a week keeps the psychiatrist away.
Yeah. Yes, the cover. So that seems like a nice proclaim.
And Flansen, you've split screen or something where the brain now is not really very legible, the display.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the brain in the half bottom, but all the text in it is gone. So you might want to go back to your note taking or to sharing your notes or something else if you want.
This is how. Oh yeah, because you cannot see this because of the
Yeah, we can't actually read the display right now. It's not legible anymore.
Thank you.
Huh.
Yeah, it'll be sort of interesting. I like this idea because it'll be interesting to see how people can approach composing them together also.
Yeah.
One thing I love about the Zoom AI summaries is that it's very, very good at detecting in a conversation when somebody made a promise or a suggestion or something. Like at the very end, it says, Jerry will do this. Everybody's going to do this, whatever. It's really smart about those things.
I am sort of unhappy to hear that because I don't like Zoom, but happy that people have this tool. Yes. I hope. Do you have to pay for it?
No, it's if you have a paid Zoom account, the basic level account, it's free.
How much do you pay? Sorry, like
$10 a month, I think.
Okay, that's a
Maybe
fair
15.
deal. It seems like a
Yeah,
fair deal.
it's not bad at all, and it's a new feature that just showed up. You can turn AI on in several different places now in Zoom, and that's one of them. And I turned that on by default, so every Zoom call I host starts with the AI summary enabled, and everybody gets a new dialogue that says, "Hey, the AI thing is listening in."
Interesting. Okay, so thank you for the information. I'm glad people can have this in an affordable sort of like familiar way.
Yeah.
Let's see if the corporation I work for can do better.
Cool. Which direction to go now?
I think it might be interesting to think about like just the composing modes. I'm still interested in the assignment. How are people going to like deliver the nuggets too? Is interesting.
I think we post a link. We post a link to our Mattermost channel, and with luck, it's actually a Markdown page living on a vault somewhere or on GitHub or something like that, or it's a blog post, or it's something else. Any modifications to that?
I wish we used web mentions from the IndieWeb people.
Yeah.
I wish web mentions were easier to use.
A good wish
I know
too.
someone. Do you know BridgieFed?
I know
Yeah,
BridgieFed, but this goes back to the discussion we had last time. Which is my philosophical discomfort with integrating with BridgieFed.
Because it's a single point of failure.
Because it's a single point of failure.
Yeah, but I'm assuming you can run it on Docker essentially. If you can't, it's an issue. Yeah.
I mean,
know
you
that that's true,
theoretically can. It like sure
Let's do
in
it.
theory you could set it up, But like one of the first things I did when I explored it is I went to the author and I was like, could I set this up on my own? And he was like, theoretically, yes. In reality, no. Right? Because it's open source. So theoretically, everything you need is there. But like a lot of the way it works is dependent on like its infrastructure, architecture. And so actually popping one up is difficult.
So single point of failure and kind of a custom built deployment, which may or may not be easily replicable,
Yeah.
like a number of indie web things.
So thank
Yeah.
you. Do you mind if I bring this up with Snarfed? Because we've been talking because of Blue Sky, support and so on. So I think it's very good feedback.
Yeah. I mean,
Cool.
maybe I brought it up with Snarf that he was the one who said it.
Cool.
So,
Okay.
I mean, maybe it's changed over time, but yeah, I'm curious. I would love, right? Like the ideal model for something like BridgieFed in my mind, and I know Snarf does not share this concept, but in my mind, the ideal model is something that works like Nostr, right? Where you can just point your system at a bunch of different BridgieFed instances, and whichever one happens to be online will work for you.
I love that actually.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, I think, because a lot of the services, I'm also like not using actively BridgieFed for now. I'm also like, but I would love to, I was planning to, so I would love to take a look at it from the point of view of like self-hosting. So maybe we get an update there in case it's easier now. But the idea of like having local core logic pointing to just like bridges that just maybe take like a very limited OAuth context. I don't know how you do it in OAuth, but I think you can do something like, I authorize this bridge to be my cross poster for 6 hours or something. And then essentially you could load balance and not have this single point of failure. It could be very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's just, yeah, the web mentions is one of those web mentions, Webfinger, they're all very good ideas that the practicality of implementation has blocked. The other thing that I hate about single point of failure is not just that like it could shut down tomorrow, but also that once it succeeds, people stop working on the conceit. Right? So like Twitter ended microblogging until it started failing because it became that single point of failure. So everybody just went on Twitter. I mean, I know it like people were out there working on it on the sort of edges, but it wasn't as effective.
That's a great observation, and it's not the same thing. But I'm reminded the old IETF thing was the protocol wasn't ready until you had two independent implementations that could talk to each other.
I mean, that's still the same with most standards. Like in the W3C, the protocol is not considered complete until you have two independent user agent standards.
Yeah. So then the problem that we've got is something like BridgieFed or Twitter or something like that isn't the standard. It's a product, and then it only needs to be single homed, not double homed, multi homed.
Yes. So
or it isn't. Maybe that's actually a big thing. I wish, for me, Mastodon is it's got two complementary problems actually for me. One of them is they copied Mastodon copies Twitter too much, and then Mastodon didn't try very hard to, or I guess society didn't say, oh my gosh, Twitter is amazing and it does wonderful things, but we can't have just one of it. We need multiple ones of it. So society didn't, help Mastodon more or create an alternative. Right in here, by the way, is something that I learned from one of Aram's blog posts, that Twitter isn't a something, it's a something, and I forget the words, but a lot of people don't really understand what Twitter was and what we lost when it started to get decomposed. And it was a megaphone and a microphone or something, I think is the.
Oh yeah, I think that was one of my
It's a great post.
newsletter
And
blogs. Right?
Is it marginal? Yeah.
because it's when you say society really lost something when Musk like put a couple bullets through Twitter's head to see if he could change it. The thing that we lost is not very well described. People go, oh yeah, well it was a microblogging site and blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. But the social processes that evolved around Twitter were actually pretty important, and we lost a bunch of them. And we don't even know it because we don't have enough posts like Aram's to describe, what it was and that it's not that anymore.
Yeah, that's the one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Twitter.
Wild
maybe
that
my-
this video is good. Yeah.
That one right there. Yep.
Interesting. So I have to say, Adam, this Substack hijacked this click because, in my opinion, because I found it in Google, and then when you click, you don't see any text. You just see like a subscribe. And I only really clicked through because I was very heavily interested, but honestly, I usually won't.
Yeah. I mean, Substack has a whole subset, if you'll excuse the word, of problems. One of the notable things is it does seem to be particularly poor at individual posts. My sort of solution for this is I haven't reposted that particular one, but I repost a lot of the work onto my blog as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Have you seen this? I think it's Microblog, which is ActivityPub federated, and
I was just playing around with Microblog recently, but
yeah, exactly. No.
it's another thing that I'd have to pay for, and then it's a service. And
but have you seen the self-hosted alternative?
which thing?
There's I think there's like a self-hosted alternative.
Microblog self-hosted?
Yeah, but it's an alternative. It's just called. Should be here somewhere. I'll send you a link. I think it's Micropub or something. Yeah,
Microblog.pub maybe? I'm looking at that on GitHub.
So open source. I really should. No, it was slightly different. Micropub maybe. Anyway, sorry.
I think it's micro. I think it's this one.
No, Micropub is a standard for this. Let's see. Microlog Pub sounds like it could be. Te sileo, vamos a ver. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, exactly. They have it.
Okay. I think I looked at this and it was sort of interesting. I think it's one of those things where the developer is very opinionated, and I like that because it usually means they're making interesting choices, but they are opinionated in a direction away from my opinionation.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where it's like
Master.
I have it. Yeah, I have it on my list, I think, and I'm like, what I really want to do is just sort of rebuild this myself with my opinions, replacing their opinions on how things should be built.
Yeah, I would be very interested in discussing that though, because in the case of like I'm interested in this particular kind of entity, which is base open source alternative to something clearly good that is non-free. So to some extent, I think there's a high leverage opportunity to really improve Microblog instead of like doing like another implementation. But I hear you. Yes, sometimes it's better to just do our own.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, definitely. I do want to talk about more too. I do think like as we are seeing with the confusion in the chat, like one of the major problems of Substack is it has a very loose relationship to your actual like in the bar URL. Because what you probably experienced, Jerry, is you get to a post, and when you scroll down, it auto continues to the next post, but does not change the URL, even though that would be really straightforward for it to do. But that's why you have the wrong link. The link above it is the right link.
Which
This
link?
is why I changed
On Twitter,
on Twitter we look down.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, because I just scanned the other post, the fuck you to Threads, and I didn't find the quote. So there it is.
Yeah, that's why. I don't know. I find that Substack makes it very easy to ask people for money in exchange for one's writing, and I like that conceptually. I have a friend who put together like a very like straightforward Stripe implementation, but it's really meant for like single purpose, like one blog post that you pay for access to. I don't know.
So Substack is really good at cross promotion too. So they're a good distribution platform for better or for worse. You know.
Inside themselves, it's the Medium problem, where it's very good internally, but unless you have an independent distribution stream external to it, it's not very good externally.
I
Another
think
thing
the
that it
internal
would
thing is
be-
better than Mediums.
Yeah. Well, their network is better than Mediums is the main thing. Nobody
Yeah.
gives a shit about Medium as a social network because it was always half-hearted. Yeah, I like the idea of like MicroPub or Substack self-hosted, which is really just Ghost, right? Like if you really want to do self-hosted Substack, the answer is Ghost. But that too is like Ghost fascinates me because it is the most mainstream piece of extremely opinionated engineering on the internet.
Say more?
Right, like Ghost,
Yeah.
because
What-
like
how so?
even Mastodon, right, like has a broad contributor base and has compromises in its structure around its community. Ghost was invented because a bunch of people were like, WordPress is too corporate now. We want to go back to WordPress when it was a blogging tool for bloggers.
Mhm.
And so they created that, and like the people who they pulled into it were very opinionated about that specific thing. So
Mhm.
like Ghost is very opinionated architecturally and in presentation around being for blogging and specifically not being for large professional organizations. Like it is opposed to the features that WordPress added that makes WordPress convenient for enterprise. And that is really interesting to me.
It's very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Beehive? Where does that fall on the spectrum?
I mean, that's just like another newsletter one. I don't know. I don't know Beehive very well.
Just another
Most
platform?
of the people I know, as far as I know, or I think like, isn't that one like, yeah, that one's like really for like large profile newsletters, I think.
No. Yeah, I don't know who they choose. I don't know much about it either. I just know that it's getting a lot of attention now that Substack is getting backlash.
I think like anyone can do it. I think, and they have a free tier. It just like the people who use it tend to be larger, whereas smaller people who are leaving Substack tend to be moving to Button Down or Blue Button. What the heck is
Blue
it called?
Button. Big Blue Button?
No, it's
No.
buttondown.email. That's the one.
Yeah, Button Down.
With all these things, I guess, and alternatives and evolution, again, is another field in which I would like to see the collective graph that we have in all our heads, all these alternatives we're exploring. I guess, this thing we're reconstructing here. I have no idea of like half the ones you mentioned.
And from the NeoBooks and Massive Wiki perspective, something like Button Down. Button Down uses the best of Markdown so you can quickly write efficiently without worrying about clumsy email, blah, blah, blah. Button Down is like a mushroom. It's like turning something into a subscription newsletter is stuff that you would add on top as an application. But the individual pieces should live in the same mycelial substrate as everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of interesting because emails provide their own particular architectural challenges on two sides. On one side, there is the problem of being marked as spam.
Mhm.
And like, it is a constant problem. Like when I'm paying for Substack, if I'm going to do Substack or Button Down, right? The reason I'm doing it is because negotiating automated spam checks is a full-time job. At the Washington Post, we have like a team of engineers that has that as part of their mandate.
Wow.
Because it's very easy to send emails. It's actually really easy to go and use like free, or not free, but like the cheapest possible tier of Amazon AWS infrastructure or Azure infrastructure, Google Cloud infrastructure, and send emails to people as a newsletter sign up. Like, it's super easy to set up. It's very easy to set up, but the problem is you could get tagged as spam, and then like you wouldn't even know half the time unless you have a whole bunch of metrics
That's cool.
and analytics and that type of thing. And then the other side of it is sign up spam, right? So creators that are like, especially at the medium level of popularity and can't afford high level anti-spam services, have a big problem with like people signing up for their newsletter and that them being marked as spam. But not the user, not the newsletter, but the user needs to be marked as spam when they are a spam sign up, because you pay for sending, right? The amount of emails you send has a cost per amount of emails. And so you don't want people to sign up who are not real people. And then you also don't want people to sign up who are malicious, because a abuse tactic is signing up for a newsletter so that you can mark it as spam, because the major platforms learn their definition of a spam email from each other, right? So if you mark it as spam on Gmail, it's more likely for everyone who uses Gmail to mark it as spam. Which is like why I've hesitated to do my own setup for this. Not because it's not easy, but because it's difficult.
No, yeah,
because these particular things are difficult. And then like also legitimate signups have to negotiate being marked as spam sometimes. So like I have my email newsletter parser where I sign up for newsletters and then they just go straight to a robot which parses them all into like interesting stuff for me. And that I had to like contact Button Down support because I had signed up for so many Button Down newsletters, and because in order to crawl the links that the newsletters send me, the robot clicks on every link, right? So Button Down interpreted that as spam behavior. So I had to go to them and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm not a spammer. I'm a human, which was interesting too. So there's like, I guess there's really like 3 degrees where you have to deal with spam and newsletters that are interesting. And that's like Ghost sort of tries to solve this problem by asking you to go through their centralized hosting, though you can self-host as well. And then to hook up, and you can hook up self-hosting to Ghost's email platform, which is also really interesting.
So this is where, like, I guess email always it looks to be on the verge of like lost to like corporate platforms because of the fact that the centralization affords them these ways of fighting spam, and to some extent collaborate with each other more easily. So and the other going back to Mastodon, I guess for a minute, it's like someone asked like, why is it that Mastodon still doesn't have spam, even though actually it's not very protected against such beyond like moderation capabilities. And one of the answers is not large enough yet. So it will have to evolve those. Mastodon meaning, Fediverse, right? So ActivityPub. So then I guess I wonder is it completely critical, say now or at 2030, to be able to send email for a newsletter, or could be that it suffices to post to the Fediverse? Maybe.
So
I do
I'm
think
really,
it's
I'm
sort
really
of
puzzled
critical.
that blogging has been killed off by Substack. And I'm exaggerating tremendously, but it's like Substack is the new blog post, and blogging is like, old people blog, and I find that really weird and like it's a step backwards. And I was going to ask the group, when I go to an individual blog post on Substack or an individual post to Substack, and I'm reading it in a browser, it goes away every now and then. I have to refresh the page because the text is not really there. I don't get what's happening. Like, why does the page not just sit there until, for the next time I come back to the tab? It's unlike any other app I use. It has to.
I'll tell you what it's like. It's like news sites, which do this for the same exact reason, right? There are posts on Substack that are paywalled, and if they're paywalled and they put the whole text on this page, browser tools will remove the thing that's blocking the text and bypass the paywall. So
Right.
the tactic to enforce your paywall is don't put the whole text on the page until after the user has cleared the paywall, in order to avoid a situation where the user is bypassing your paywall.
Wow.
Except in the case in which you're a search engine very often, or like which is
Yes.
yeah.
It turns out the best way to read Substack is as a headless browser.
Yes. Curl, maybe. I don't know. I have to try.
So interesting.
Yeah. Cool. So I think recording may be about to cut, but I'm not sure actually. Maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't have 1 hour
And-
record.
And we're probably sort of spent for this call, I think.
Yeah. I think.
This has been super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great call. Thank you so much.
I was quiet, but I got a lot out of it. Just
And
listening.
we have some homework for next week, and happy to meld that with more NeoBook stuff or whichever way we go.
Yes, we'd love to. I'll stop recording now and see if it works.
Awesome. Yeah, please. And send me a link to the recording.